Yep, we'll get started. All right, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is the third session we have on our AAWT planning series. In the last two sessions, we covered navigation and water management and also gear. And those recordings are now up on YouTube if anyone is after those. So today, what we're going to be talking about is blister management and environmental best practices. As always, we'll leave space for questions throughout the presentation, and if you have questions, jump in at any time. And we'll also have lots of time for general questions at the end if you have anything else you want to ask. All right.
Cool. So, yeah, we're going to start by talking about foot care and blister management. And so, as I'm sure some of you guys know already, when you're hiking, your feet are one of the most crucial links in your body. And it's really important that you take care of your feet. Blisters can be incredibly painful. They can bring tears. And they're one of the most common reasons that hiking trips get cut short. Fortunately, they are almost entirely preventable, primarily with good preparation and foot care. So why do we get blisters? I mean, very, very briefly, we get blisters when there's high levels of friction between your feet and the shoe. And to reduce your chance of getting blisters, you need to reduce the number of high friction points on your feet and also in your shoe. A really important thing that we want to note, and one of the key takeaways for the blister side of things, is that the calluses are in hiking. Calluses are your enemy. The calluses are points where they are the really high points of friction in your shoes, especially when your feet get damp, which is inevitable. So calluses, they're great for protecting your feet when you're walking around barefoot, but when you're hiking in shoes, they're the number one cause of blisters, and they're an excellent predictor of blisters, which we'll get into as well.
Yeah, awesome. So, on the same note, what we really like to do before every hike that we go on is we really like to try to reduce the size of these calluses on our feet. And as Tom said, that's because calluses are where there's really high levels of friction, and that's what causes blisters. So what we like to do before every trip is roughly 10 days before the trip, whenever we have a shower, at the end of the shower, once we hop out, we like to grab a pumice stone and we really like to file our feet down and get as much dead skin as possible off of our feet. Obviously, you want to avoid taking too much skin off and creating a really raw sensation on your skin, but filing back those calluses is really, really important. And it's really good to focus on areas where you get blisters quite frequently. So that could be, the ball of your feet. They could be your pinky toes. In this picture up here, we have, this is a photo of Tom's toe.
From about 10 minutes ago.
And you can see there's like this line of dead skin. Oops. You can see there's this line of dead skin along here. And that's the type of thing we'd really be trying to get rid of as much as possible before a hike, because that is somewhere that the skin will just rub and create problems for you.
It will fold. What happens is the calluses, they will get wet and damp and they will fold. And so, like in this instance, where we'd be trying to round out this triangle, like with a hard point, we'd be trying to round it out to make it kind of smooth. Like the goal is to try and make everywhere on your foot look like a smooth baby's bottom, basically.
Yeah, so after we file back these calluses and once our feet are dry, we really like to apply lots of moisturizer, after the shower and also before going to sleep at night. And we always wear socks on over the top of that so that it doesn't rub off onto anything and you can really get the most absorption from that moisturizer as possible. So that's what we like to do around 10 days before the trip, leading up to the trip whenever we have a shower. And then as it gets a bit close to the trip, maybe 5 days beforehand, we tend to stop with the pumicing because you don't want to create any raw sensation on your skin. And so we really just focus on moisturizing and cutting back our toenails. Another thing you can do is also filing your toenails to make them a bit thinner. If you have really thick toenails, filing them back is really important to prevent any issues occurring there. And then again, yeah, moisturizing overnight and during the day, really, really important.
Cool. So I suspect for some people, this is like a very different way of thinking about foot care and blisters because from our experience, uh, the way to prevent 95% of problems, is to have shoes that fit and to prepare your feet, basically. So does anyone have any questions about this idea? You can also, oh yeah, yeah. You can also shoot through them in Messenger. Yeah, Jarvis. Oh, I think you're on mute. Um, Jarvis, did you have a question? Yeah, okay. So the mute is in the top right corner of your screen, I think.
There it
Cool.
is.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'm not very familiar with
Nah, that's all good.
Microsoft Teams, so I've made the classic blunder of muting myself and not knowing how to mute myself. The question I had was, I thought this is what you said about calluses makes sense, but it's counterintuitive because I thought calluses were there to protect your feet, protect your skin, specifically at the points where there was a lot of friction.
Yeah, I guess. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, that was my question.
Yeah.
I mean, I get calluses on my feet at the points where my feet are subject to a lot of friction.
Yeah.
From different daily activities. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, I thought, to be trying to remove the body's natural defense against friction.
Yeah, so I guess without getting like too deep into the weeds of kind of like why you're wanting to do this, like what you can think of is that calluses are dead skin, right? And
Yep.
so the dead skin, it's not elastic, like it doesn't stretch. Whereas like healthy, alive skin, it has stretch in it. And it's this elasticity that gives its resiliency like to the stresses that your feet are subject to when you're walking. And so by having calluses that are not elastic, like what happens is they just like you just get folding and you just get this like if you think of like a callus here on your skin, it's just going to move and then it's going to pull on the skin underneath it. And
Okay.
so, it means that you end up getting blisters underneath your callus because you don't have this level of elasticity. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff too, but we promise you that this will 100% help.
Okay.
And for me, especially like my feet, they callus or they like thicken. I'm not sure what the word is, much faster than Maddie's feet do. And so I need to be a lot more proactive on this stuff. And I can tell when I'm going, even when I'm not hiking, if I'm going for a run and I've let my calluses build up, I can just feel the kind of the rubbing there. And then if I spend a couple days just filing back my calluses, moisturizing, doing these basic things, then I don't get any of these these hot spots developing. So yeah, it's really counterintuitive, but the overall goal is to get really healthy, elastic skin because that is what is the most resilient to like the trauma that your feet are subject to in shoes, which is different to what your feet are subject to if you're like barefoot.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Did anyone have any other questions about this concept? Nope. Cool.
Great.
All right. Cool. So the next thing that we're going to go on to talk about is shoe sizing. So yeah, the two most important things for preventing blisters are like preparing your feet and making sure that you have shoes that fit. Um, And so when it comes to sizing, there are kind of two main things to consider. The first thing is the length of the shoe. And so most people are generally pretty comfortable with picking the correct length. You want somewhere between a pinky and a thumb width of space. Um, if you have less than that, your toes are probably going to be hitting the end. And if you have more space than that, the shoe will not be fitted enough and it will be really quite sloppy. Um, and so I guess the the main thing here with both the length and the width is that to determine the size of if the shoe's the right size, you need to take the insole out and you need to take your foot with your favorite hiking sock that you wear and you need to place it on the insole, and that's how you're going to tell whether you have the right space. You don't need to, this is kind of the most exact way, I guess. Um,
Yeah, and on this length concept, it's really important to recognize that you want the gap between your longest toe and the end of the insole to be the one that has this pinky width to thumb width of gap. Some people have, their big toe is not their longest toe, and so they can make the mistake where they size their shoe based on their big toe, but you really want to be looking at your longest toe for that sizing.
Yeah. And here it's really important that this sizing is including the sock that you use. If you're like a hardcore double socker, then you need to include this in your sizing beforehand. Um,
Yeah.
cool. And then uh, the next factor that we're going to talk about is the width of your shoe. And this is something that people get wrong much more often than they do length. Um, so with the width, again, the way that you can tell is you take the insole out and you stick your foot on the insole. And basically, what you're looking for is if there are points on the insole where your foot is overlapping the insole, what that means is when you're walking, at some point, you're going to get a problem there. It might not happen if you walk 10 Ks a day. It might not happen if you walk 15. It might be only if you walk X kilometers in the rain, or there'll be certain environmental factors that will trigger problems. But if your foot is overlapping the insole, like here, down here, here you can see my heel is overlapping the insole, and then here as well. These are all places that at some point, if I walked hard enough in harsh enough conditions, I would get a problem. Um, and the big problem with shoes that aren't wide enough is that it's very hard to make your shoe wider on the trail. Basically, it means cutting it open, and that's a whole other can of worms. Um, so what does a good width look like? Here you can see my heel is not overlapping the insole. Here you can see there's a bit of space. There's a bit of space here. And even here, there's a bit of space. So what we're looking for is, you don't need anything more than 1 mil of space, or even 1 or 2 mils, because if you have too much space, then your feet are going to be really sloppy in the shoes, and you're going to have your laces too tight, which can cause tendon problems on the top of your feet. So it's kind of this fine balancing art of trying to find the shoe that is the right width for your foot. But realistically, most people's problem is that their shoes are too narrow. And so what people typically do is they size up, which does make the shoe wider. But realistically, what you need to do is go wider rather than longer. And so the widths of shoes, like a female shoe is a B width, a normal male shoe is a D width, and a wide male shoe is 2E, and a super wide shoe is 4E. So I have quite a narrow foot. I can fit into super narrow ski boots without any boot fitting. And I run in typically female width shoes. So like a B width, sometimes D width, but I hike in a 2E shoe. And that's what you can see here in these insole pictures. These are actually the insoles from the shoes that I used on the Te Araroa FKT, where over 3,000 Ks, feet wet heaps of the time, you know, walking like 60 plus Ks a day. I didn't have any foot problems there. I'm not saying I didn't have any foot problems, but I didn't have foot problems caused by width issues. The other thing is that this width recommendation, yeah, it's only specific to hiking, and we don't have experience with custom orthotics. So if you do have orthotics, then we're not really sure how that changes this calculation. That's something you just need to experiment with. Does anyone have any questions about the length and width of your shoe? Chances are, if you took your hiking shoes now, you put on your favorite hiking socks, took the insole out, it's probably too narrow. That's what we find most people have. Yes, question.
Hello. So I'm one of those women that has a really wide toe box and a really narrow ankle.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for me to find hiking boots. And so sizing up means that I end up being very sloppy in the toe box. But if it's the correct size for length, then often I end up with a lot of heel slip.
Yeah.
So is there anything to do there except just try to find a better boot?
Ultras, if you are happy to go down the 0 mil drop trend, Ultras have a really wide forefoot compared to their midfoot and heel.
They're actually too wide across the midfoot for me.
Yeah.
But they're perfect at the toe box. So
yeah, this is one of those things where you need to go to like Paddy Palin or like a running store or something, and you've just got to try them on, and it kind of sucks because everyone has different shaped feet, and it's like this is why we're not saying, oh, here are my favorite shoes, you should go use these shoes, because it's pretty meaningless, really. So
okay, thank you.
yeah, the only thing that I could suggest is to try the 2E, like a wider model, because that's for me, because I'm in a similar boat, and that's where I've had the most success.
Okay, thank you.
The other reason this width stuff is really important is because it helps account for the fact that when you walk, your feet are going to swell. And so this is meaning that when your feet inevitably swell, your feet have enough space in your shoe without causing problems. Any other questions? Cool. The final thing we want to talk about with shoes is the idea of waterproof or non-waterproof shoes. With shoes so once you have shoes that fit well and you've done good foot preparation, the main reason that you might end up with a problem is because of moisture. And the problem with waterproof shoes is that they don't breathe. Despite breathability claims, it's effectively putting a plastic bag around your feet. And so, you know, over the span of days and weeks, if you're walking with a waterproof shoe compared to a non-waterproof shoe, with a waterproof shoe, you're going to spend much more time with wet, damp, sweaty feet compared to if you have non-waterproof shoes. And so that means you're much more likely to have like blisters or develop problems because of bacterial or fungal growth, which is actually a really common cause of foot problems on long hiking trips. Because it's inevitable that your feet are going to get wet, either from sweat or rain or river crossings or dewy grass. And what it means is that with a waterproof shoe, once they get wet, they stay wet. Whereas with a breathable shoe, it means they will dry. And so you're trying to take a long-term view about which type of shoe is going to keep my feet most comfortable for the longest period of time over, you know, weeks or months. You know, waterproof shoes can be really good if you're hiking in winter or when it's extremely cold, if you have lots of like freezing river crossings, or like there are times when waterproof shoes can be really good, but general 3-season hiking is not one of them. Cool.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about that? Nope. Cool.
Great. So, yeah.
Yep. Max?
No.
Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Cool. All right, we'll keep going.
All right. So yes, you've got all this preparation, shoe stuff, and the other thing you can be doing to really look after your feet is obviously whilst you're hiking. So there are a few simple things that we like to do that we find really help. The first one is we wash our feet really frequently, sometimes multiple times a day. Maybe we'll stop in the middle of the day, air our feet out completely, and give them a good wash, and that really makes them feel a lot better. We also really like to swap our socks quite frequently, and that again helps you stay on top of hygiene. It also just feels really nice putting on a new fresh pair of socks, which is always good. And then a couple other things we do, we still pumice sometimes whilst we're hiking in the evening or after a long day hiking in the rain when your feet are a bit damp already. We might get the pumice stone out for a few minutes and just have a go at those calluses a little bit just to keep them at bay so that they don't get any bigger whilst we're hiking. And again, moisturizing, we still like to do this every night where we moisturize our feet and we sleep with our socks on just to keep the skin as healthy as possible. And all of these things, the frequency with which you do them kind of depends on personal preference and what the hiking conditions are. It's really, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just these are things you can do to help keep your feet a bit happier whilst you're hiking.
Yeah, like say I have to spend much more time pumicing my calluses than Maddie does because my feet, like my skin thickens faster for some reason. With the washing the feet and swapping socks, yeah, it's, like it's kind of a constant, you wash your feet, you swap socks, you wash the socks, and then you're drying socks, and then you're swapping socks again. And like Maddie said, it's you kind of find a balance between how much effort you're putting into looking after your feet compared to how often you get problems. Like if you're walking really hard and you're finding that your feet are causing you problems, you'll need to do this more often, less often if you get fewer problems. But I'd say the minimum for us is always washing our feet at the end of the day and putting clean socks on before we go to bed. I guess the other thing quickly is if you've been walking and your feet have been wet for a really long period of time, like in the rain or something like that, when you get to camp, you can air them out for a little bit, and then after they've aired out, you can then moisturize them before going to bed. I don't really understand why you want to moisturize your feet after they've been wet for a long period of time, but as long as you give them an airing period, you can like A/B test this with like one foot, just let it dry all night, and the other foot give it like, I don't know, 15 to 60 minutes dry time, and then moisturize it before bed. And for us, that second option, our feet feel way, way better in the morning. But
Yeah.
I don't really understand why.
Yes, questions.
Hi, look, I might have missed it. What do you use as a moisturizer?
Oh, great question. So we don't necessarily have a particular moisturizer we use, but we try to find one that's really thick. The thin, watery moisturizers just aren't quite as effective for us. So a common one that we use is the Rawleigh's salve.
Ointment. Yeah.
Sorry, Rawleigh's ointment, and it's a really thick moisturizer that we find just, it stays on a really long time and it's super effective.
Basically, the more gross it is, probably the better it will work. And this is also because you're thinking about like how heavy this is to carry. And so you want the moisturizer to go a long way. And if you have an ointment that's really thick, then you don't have to carry as much of it to get as much bang for your buck. So like at home, like it doesn't really matter, just use whatever you have. But on the trail, like use something that you find you don't have to use as much of to get the same results, because it can get really heavy.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Okay, and so now we're going to touch briefly on dealing with blisters if you do end up getting them. And so when you get a blister, there's kind of two things that you need to do. You first need to manage the blister itself, but then you need to deal with the cause of the blister, because if you don't do that, it's going to come back. Well, it probably will come back. So managing the blister, everyone has different methods that they like to use, but for us, we like to pop it if it's painful and then drain all the fluid. And when we're doing this, we really want to make sure that we make a hole in the blister that is large enough that it's not going to close back over. So we really like to use something like splinter probes to pop our blisters. If we have nothing else on hand, we will just use a sewing needle or something after we've sterilized it. But because sewing needles are quite thin, the hole that they make in your skin is really, really small, and that can close over, say overnight, and then the blister will just refill with fluid. So the idea is you want to make sure that there's a hole that stays open so that the fluid can properly drain and the blister doesn't reform.
And we're doing that, like in an ideal world, you'd not pop the blister because it would heal faster that way. But what you don't want is a blister that's really painful, and you don't want a blister that pops in like whilst you're walking in the middle of the day.
Yeah, so we pop the blister, we drain it, and then we like to cover it. We usually like to use something like an island dressing to cover our blisters, because that way, so I'm not sure if, for those who don't know what an island dressing is, it's got a non-adhesive patch in the middle and it's adhesive around the edge. And so what that does,
I mean, it's a Band-Aid.
yeah, it's a Band-Aid. What that does is that it means the non-adhesive side won't stick to the sensitive skin that is on top of the blister. And we find that it's just more comfortable, especially when they peel off or you have to take them off. It's not going to tear the skin off with it. And we really like using something like this one, which is in this lovely shape of an H. It's called a joint knuckle dressing, and we find that because of this H-like shape, it works really well conforming to your feet, especially around toes and things. It folds really nicely and it stays on. So we like to cover it with an island dressing, and then we put a general tape over the top, like a rigid tape or something like KT tape, and that just helps disperse the shear forces over a broader area, which will just help back off the pressure on that blister a little bit.
And it will smooth over the bump of the non-adhesive padding bit.
Yeah. So that's kind of our go-to when we have a blister, when it comes
Could I add
to
something else?
Yes.
So with these bandages, the other thing that's nice about them is that like we should have had a better photo here really. The bit that is not the adhesive pad, so the sticky bit, it's made of Fixamol, and so it's a breathable tape. And so what that means is it's not getting all sweaty and gross because the moisture can pass out.
Yeah. Yeah, and so once we've managed the blister, then we'll move on to looking at what caused the blister. And this is generally some high friction point in your shoe. And so the best thing you can do is kind of you want to reduce this friction by applying some sort of low friction tape to these areas. So you can see in these insoles we've got in this image here, we've applied tape to areas that are high friction for us. This was actually before we started hiking, so we applied these preemptively, but you can apply them on the trail as long as the tape sticks well enough to the insole. And this type of low friction tape, it can be duct tape, it could be Engo patches, which are really, really great. These just help to reduce the friction so that your foot slides more easily in the shoe, and that's going to stop the rubbing. And we find that that really helps. And a really important thing to note about using these low friction tapes is that you generally want to put them on your shoe, say on the insole or the shoe itself, not on your skin, because they won't be very comfortable on your skin itself.
With this concept of using low friction tape, the reason that we really like it is because it's much more permanent than using like a lubricant on your foot, like Vaseline. And it's a targeted approach in that you're not trying to remove all friction in your shoe. You need friction for your foot to not slam into the end of your shoe. And so, like, conceptually, what you're trying to do is reduce the friction in the specific point where you're having a problem. Because, you're trying to, because like I said before, you need some friction. So like you couldn't cover your whole insole in a smooth tape because your foot would just slide. So actually what we found is that this setup, which we had done preemptively, it didn't work that well for us because it was too low friction. You know, like this heel bit, coupled with these two side bits, we were sliding too much. And so we ended up like taking the heel tape off or like removing one of these or making them smaller or something. So yeah, I guess the main point is that if you're having a problem in your shoes and your shoes fit well, this is like the best way to tackle that problem. And what Maddie was saying before about popping blisters, putting a dressing on and then another tape on top. This is like a general approach. You know, obviously there are specific circumstances where doing something else is different, but that's just like a general first principles thing.
Yeah. Are there any questions on dealing with blisters? Great.
Cool.
All right.
Great. So we're going to move on to environmental best practices now. And so I'm sure you guys have seen these before, the leave no trace principles. So we're not going to go through all of these in detail. You can find this all online. You know, there's lots of great resources. So what we're going to focus on today is the stuff that we think is really specific and important to the Australian Alps walking track. So the first thing is about washing and soap. So basically, we don't use soap when we go out into the bush. We don't think you need it. We don't think it's necessary. The idea that it's biodegradable, I don't think is really correct. But the point is that if you are going to use it, you need to use it away from water sources. So you're like picking up the water and transporting it away from the river or the lake or whatever. And then the second thing is if you're wanting to go for a swim, you need to think about the chemicals that are on your body. And so it's not that you shouldn't go swimming, but say for us, if we have applied sunscreen to our legs and face and we've used insect repellent, we will first, away from the river, we will wash those off our body as best as we can. You know, obviously you're not going to get every little molecule off, but you know, you're trying to remove this stuff, and then you can go have like your swim, and then that just means that, you know, you're not dumping heaps of sunscreen and insect repellent into the water, because, you know, we can detect these things in water and it is present, like it does happen. Trying to think if there's anything else with this. Yeah. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about using soap? Nope.
I guess the same concept applies for washing your pots after you cook and everything. If you're using soap of some sort, yeah, try to use as little as possible and do it away from the water sources, just so it's not contaminating it. But again, we don't use it.
You can
But
like
everyone's
boiling
different.
water is fine.
Yeah. All right. All right, going to the toilet. So this is a really big thing, a big topic, and you can talk about it for a long time, but we'll talk briefly about what we think is a really great thing to do. So obviously along the Australian Alps walking track, you've got several different
Oh yeah, Reese has just put in sand or dirt is a good soap.
yeah,
Yeah, so if you're trying to clean your pot, you can just like pick up some gravel and put it in your pot and scrape it around, and then that's like easy peasy. That's a really good point, Reese. Thanks.
definitely. Yeah, so when it comes to going to the toilet along the AWT, there are quite a few drop toilets along the way, especially at the huts, which is really, really great. And so whenever you can, you use the drop toilets because that minimizes your impact quite a bit because your waste isn't going into the environment. If there are no drop toilets, then, you need to bury your waste. And so we really like to carry the ultralight trowel by Bogler Co. And it's about 13.5 grams. It's in this picture on the top left here, and we think it works really well. It's pretty sturdy and it's got a little handle, which is really nice to hold.
Yeah. So you can, when you're like digging a hole, it's not your hand going into like sharp metal. It's like a little plastic thing.
Yeah. So yeah, you bury your waste, people say 10 to 15 centimeters deep. And obviously it's really important that you carry your toilet paper out with you. So you don't bury it, it doesn't biodegrade very quickly, and you don't leave it on the ground. Personally, we don't even use toilet paper. We use a little bidet, which is in this image here on the bottom left. Is this little plastic device that you can put in the top of your water bottle, and then you can use water to wash yourself after you go to the toilet. And we really like this. I mean, we find it's much more hygienic
Oh
and
yeah,
you
much
have,
less chafing.
yeah, it's really hygienic and you have the added benefit of not having to carry out your used toilet paper. It's really great. We'd highly recommend trying it if you haven't tried one before. They're really easy to get online, pretty cheap, so definitely worth giving it a go.
The other benefit of carrying a bidet is that they're really good for cleaning wounds because it's like a high pressure water device. So they're double. Um, Aska has
Yep.
just made a point that on the main range you need to remove and carry your waste out with you, and so that's something that we'll be touching on soon.
Yep. The other thing I'll just talk about on this general topic with toilet paper is that for females, it's really important that again you're not leaving your toilet paper that you use after you do a wee just lying around. It's actually quite a common problem on hiking trails that a lot of the toilet paper you see scattered on the ground is a lot of it is from females doing wees, not necessarily people doing a poo. So for females, a really great system you can look at is using something like a wee rag, which is a little piece of cloth that you use to wipe after you do a wee, and you carry it on the outside of your pack during the day, and the UV from the sun actually kills the bacteria. So it stays perfectly hygienic. Obviously, you're going to wash it every few days, but it's a really great system to not have to carry out your toilet paper because you're not using it at all in the first place. So that's another really great thing.
Yeah, I think that we really encourage people to try the bidet because it's just like it's so much better than using toilet paper. Whenever we finish like a multi-month hike and I go home and I use toilet paper, I'm like, oh man, this sucks. Like we should just buy a bidet at home, really. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any questions on this before we talk about the main range in particular and carrying your waste out? Awesome. All right, so as Aska mentioned in the chat, it's absolutely true that on the main range, you need to carry your waste out with you. It's actually anywhere in Kosciuszko National Park above the tree line. This is the case. And so our system that we use for this is the same system we employ when we're doing backcountry skiing, where you always carry your waist out with you because it's winter and there's snow, and yeah, you just
No one wants to see us poo on the snow.
you're always carried out with you. And so our system that we like to use is outlined here. We have a dry bag, and inside that dry bag we have 2 garbage bag liners, just as a double layer, just in
Insurance
case.
policy.
And then we have a big Ziploc bag. And then whenever we go to the toilet, we lay out some baking paper. We go on the baking paper and then we wrap it up and put it in a little paper bag. And then that paper bag goes in the Ziploc, which goes in the garbage bag liners, which goes in the dry bag. And the really great thing about this system is that whenever you get to a hut and there are drop toilets, the baking paper and the paper bag, you're actually allowed to put those in drop toilets. So what you can do is you can open your dry bag, your garbage bag, and your Ziploc, and you can take out your waste that's in the paper bag with the baking paper, and that can just go straight in the drop toilet. So
that's totally something you're allowed to do.
Yeah, so you don't have to carry it all the way out. You just have to carry it to the next hut where there's a drop toilet. So this is the system we really like to use when we need to carry out our waste.
And it's also really important because up on the main range is one of the most heavily trafficked areas of like Kosciuszko National Park. And so, yeah, it's a real problem up there. And so it's really crucial that you do this. Like you can't do an Australian Alps walking track without like a plan for the main range for how you're going to tackle this.
Yeah. And again, we'll use the bidet. Yeah. So no toilet paper, but if you were using toilet paper, you just put it in the paper bag, and then that can also go in the drop toilets when you reach a hut.
Yeah.
Are there any questions about this? Awesome. Moving on.
Cool. So the other big thing on the Alps track is about picking your campsites. And so this really comes down to picking an appropriate spot. And so what this means is avoiding fragile areas. And so you do that, like the phrase that, we use in Leave No Trace is about camping on durable surfaces. And so this might be some dry grass, gravel, sand, or pre-made campsites. It just, not the lovely patch of wildflowers. Also, it's important to avoid making a new campsite because there are already others that have been cleared by other hikers. So, if you're in an area and you see a nice spot to camp, go there. Don't just try and make a new campsite if you can avoid it. The other thing is that you need to camp, around 100 meters away from water where it's possible, and that's also just generally a good thing to do because you'll find you're much warmer when you sleep and you get much less condensation. So there's lots of good reasons to camp not directly near water sources. The other thing with the Alpine track, this is a big one, is about hut etiquette. Huts are amazing. We're really lucky that we have an awesome network of huts, but it's important to use them sensibly and appropriately. They're great to socialize in. They're great to cook dinner in, to have a warm fire on a cold night, but they are meant for emergency use only for sleeping. And so the general hut etiquette is that you need to leave it in better shape than you found it. So this means sweeping out the floors. If you use firewood, you need to go cut more firewood, from appropriate sources. And, the other really big thing with huts is about not leaving anything behind in them. This obviously includes common sense items like rubbish, but it extends to unopened food, half-used gas canisters, and things like that. There is an argument to be made that there are some things that you could leave in there for emergency purposes, But realistically, when like the parks come in, like they just take basically all of it out. So just bring it out with you. You don't need to leave anything in there. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about things like that? Awesome.
Great. All right, and the last thing we'll talk about is your rubbish and your food scraps. Again, pretty common sense that you carry all your rubbish out with you. But the thing that can be a little bit more of a gray area is what you do with your food scraps. And it's really important that you either carry it out, typo, sorry everyone, you carry it out or you eat it. Leaving it around, if you wash your pot and there's little bits of pasta left in it, you don't just want to pour that onto the grass and just leave it, because that's going to attract lots of animals and it's really bad for them to be eating that sort of stuff. So in terms of the food scraps, the reason we want to be carrying it out or just eating it is because we don't want to be attracting the wildlife and giving them food that they're not meant to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Everything you just carry out or
eat.
With food, you eat it.
It's good for you, free calories.
I'll just mention actually with the rubbish, it's also really important that you don't burn it in the fire, because that doesn't help it decompose at all. It's just gonna be a burnt piece of rubbish, and it's
like
still
plastic, you mean?
Yeah,
and
it's
tins.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything to burn it. You still need to carry it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward. Any questions on food scraps and rubbish? Cool.
Awesome.
That's the end of the talk that we had planned.
Finished in record time.
I know.
Not only under 2 hours, but under 1 hour.
We'd really like, anyone who has any questions, please feel free to ask them now. Anything on what we've talked about or just anything in general that you were wondering, we're happy to stick around and answer questions for as long as you guys are here for. So, yeah.
Yep. So, Aska, what's your question?
Sorry, I came in a little bit too late, I think. So my apologies if you already addressed that issue. I've noticed in your images going back to blisters that you had toe socks.
Yeah.
I never use toe socks, although I have worked with people who swear by toe socks. What are the benefits of toe socks?
It's like giving each toe a permanent hug. We only hike in toe socks. Like for us, toe blisters are one of the things that if we don't wear toe socks, we get not very frequently, but it can totally happen. And for us, this wearing toe socks is, it's just a really easy, simple thing that you can do to go a long way to preventing toe problems. The number one thing with toe socks, especially if you wear the thicker types, we prefer thin toe socks, but if you wear the thicker types, you need to take this into account when you're sizing your shoe. So you need to make sure that you take your insole out and you put your foot on it with your toe sock and see how it fits. Because the reason some people get problems with toe socks is because they have each bit of fabric between all their toes, it pushes them out wider, and then suddenly their toe box is not wide enough. So toe socks are awesome as long as you make sure that your shoes are the appropriate width for wearing them.
Yeah, we definitely recommend them.
Thank you. And do you actually wear liners as well, or liner toe socks and socks, or just toe socks?
We use just the toe socks. We don't use 2 pairs of socks. The reason we don't like that is because that means you have more material on your foot. So if you think for a hand analogy, if it's really hot, would you wear 2 pairs of gloves or thick gloves? We ascribe to wearing thin socks because they dry faster and they don't hold on to as much moisture. A lot of the problems that people try solve with like the 2-sock model are better solved by using your sensible foot care preparation techniques and by using targeted friction relief with like low friction tape, like duct tape or Engo patches, and making sure that your shoes are sized appropriately. If you do those things, you don't need a double sock approach. And then that then means your feet are consistently cooler and drier for longer. And so then you're avoiding other problems too. So we totally understand why people go down the 2-sock route, but it also means you end up having to size your shoes up sometimes, and then you end up with a bad fit because you have too much sock thickness. So does that help?
Yes, thank you. And also one other thing that, I mean, obviously you would be using woolen socks, right?
No, actually, we don't
Wow.
use woolen socks. We find that the woolen socks, they hold a lot of moisture, and so there are some places where they'll be really good, but they just hold too much moisture for our liking. We really like to use synthetic socks.
Yeah, like Cool Max or something.
Yeah.
Like if you take like the Injinji liner socks, the merino liner sock weighs like 50 grams, and the Cool Max synthetic version weighs 34 grams, or like whatever around that. And so if you put both of them, you completely submerge them, the merino one will take much, much longer to dry. And so whilst merino is really good because it doesn't smell and it has other benefits like that, ultimately merino socks stay wet for much longer than a synthetic sock. So I think for a lot of people, that's a bit of a hot take. But that's our experience at least.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Great. Sneak in under 60 minutes. Cool. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, got one more.
Yeah, of course.
With the hiking bidet thing, where do you get it from?
Amazon, garage grown gear. So if you look at our gear lists, you'll see it. This one is called Kulo Clean. You can buy it from ultralighthiker.com.au. They're a really good source for a lot of these kind of like weird niche hiking products.
And they've got different colors, not just black, which is nice.
Oh, and a glow in the dark one, which is very fancy. Maybe we need to up our game with a glow in the dark bidet.
Can I chip in here?
Yeah.
I was looking at all those bidets and things, and then I discovered that I had I don't know, it was an old shampoo bottle or something with a little pop-up lid. You just press on one side and it opens so you can squeeze out the shampoo, whatever it is. And I found that put on a bottle that fits works as a perfectly good bidet. And
yeah,
then
awesome.
And that way you can just close it again, so you never got any problem with leaks.
And is that bidet at like a right angle? So like if your bottle's here, is the spout up or is it like to the side?
I couldn't get my camera working, sorry, otherwise I'd show you.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you just pop it up and and then you squeeze the bottle and it comes out at right angles.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Because the main thing is from our experience is that like you don't want the water to be coming out straight out of the bottle. You want it to be coming out at a right angle because that's like the most that's ergonomic.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, great. And there are other options like the Kulo Clean's not the only one. It depends on like what water bottle you use. I mean, I think we're testing another one now that's like 4 grams instead of 10 grams or something like that. Cool.
So you just attach this to your drinking bottle or whatever, or do you have a special bottle that you carry with you? Because I mean, I would normally have my hydration pack, which is not a bottle, and then I would have a couple of empty bottles that I would use to dehydrate my food, rehydrate my food, but I don't drink out of bottles. So do you actually carry a little bottle just for that purpose?
We don't. We just use the water bottles that we drink out of. You can, I mean, it's hard to see in this image, but it just kind of it slots into. You take the cap off the bottle and it slots in. But if you don't carry bottles normally to drink out of,
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
you could look at getting just like a smaller, maybe 300 ml bottle that the V-Day fits into, and trying that just to see if you like it.
Yeah, I don't think we have a really good answer for that, sorry, because we carry water bottles.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions? Cool. All right. This recording will be put up on YouTube in the next few days too.
Yep.
If you wanted to go back over anything. Yeah, the gear lists that we have on our website have a lot of this stuff in like excruciatingly painful details. So you can look at all that too if you if you're wanting to see like specific stuff that we use. Yeah, Jarvis, you had a question?
Oh, yes. So the baking paper that you use when you're taking your waste out from a campsite, have you made sure that that's biodegradable? A lot of it actually has a plastic film on it.
Yes, we have. I'll just see.
Yeah, the glad to be green compostable bake paper.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one we use.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
We should have mentioned that.
Because
Yeah, that's a really important detail.
It won't degrade in the drop.
Yeah.
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 Got a plastic. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's okay.
And I might say thank you for the seminar as well. I think we've come to an end.
Yeah, you're
We're
most
wrapping
welcome.
up, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Cool. All right.
If anyone has any other questions, you can send us a message or something. We're always happy to answer questions at any time. Yeah. And thanks everyone for coming.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Reece. See ya.